Hey guys, what's up? This is Crex, and I want to welcome you to episode 3 of Soundwave, where today we're continuing the Black Sabbath retrospective and reviewing this beast of a record, Master of Reality. Now, this was the final album in the Roger Bain trilogy of albums, and it came out July 21st, 1971, and I want to start off by saying I've been neglecting on saying a particular backstory about Tony Iommi that's pretty famous at this point. He used to work at some steel factory in Birmingham, England before he became a full-time musician. And I think his last day on the job, they put him in some part of the factory he had never been in before, and he suffered an accident. Something came down and ended up cutting off the fingertips of his right hand. Now, he's been a lefty guitar player, so, that's the moneymaker right there, the fretting hand. And, most people probably would have given up on playing right then and there. I mean, I remember seeing stories where he said he was really depressed, but he found a story by the jazz player Django Reinhardt. Now, Django Reinhardt is a guitar player that I believe suffered like pretty terrible burns on his hand, and he was only able to utilize 2 of his fingers on his fretting hand. But the guy persevered, ended up pioneering a whole new style of jazz music called gypsy jazz, and Tony saw that and was very much inspired. He ended up creating these almost like fake fingertip moldings at the end of his fingers so that he could play guitar again. But what he found is that it caused him a lot of pain and discomfort when he did so. So he had to kind of find strings that were a lot looser and easier for him to play. Now, light gauge guitar strings at the time, I believe, weren't very common like they are now. So he ended up putting banjo strings on his guitar. Now, in most stories about Black Sabbath and Tony Iommi in particular, you always hear about he put these lighter gauge strings on and he tuned down right away. That's not the case because the first 2 albums are in E standard. This is the album, though, where they finally tuned down to C sharp. And it might be one of the earliest examples that I'm aware of, at least, where a band downtunes to that degree. I mean, nowadays you got gent bands playing in drop Z or whatever. But at the time, it was almost unheard of, and it gives the music on this album in particular a very sludgy, nasty sound that the first 2 didn't really quite have yet. They were heavy, but it doesn't have this level of griminess that you hear on this album. And we're going to explore that today as we go track by track. You guys know the rules. We do standard track listing only. So, in order, we're going to be doing Sweet Leaf, After Forever, Embryo, Children of the Grave, Orchid, Lord of this World, Solitude, and Into the Void, which is the intro riff I played at the beginning. So, without any further ado, let's just get right into it. Track 1, Sweet Leaf. This song is about
Snoring, smoking weed, rolling fatties, smoking blunts. Who smokes the blunts? We smoke the blunts. Rolling blunts and smoke.
Should be pretty obvious. It starts off with this looping intro of Tony Iommi actually coughing after apparently he hit a joint that Ozzy had given him. And he thought it was hilarious, so they just kind of recorded it. You kind of hear it travel back and forth from speaker to speaker, and then the actual song kicks in. And the first thing you notice right away, the sludgy guitar tone of Tony Iommi and the super punchy bass of Geezer Butler. Now, the bass on this album is so loud, and I mean that in a good way. The tones that both of those guys have mesh so well together and just gives basically every song on this album this sludgy, smoky kind of sound. I mean, a lot of people point to Master of Reality as kind of the blueprint for stoner metal, sludge metal kind of stuff. I mean, we go back to Sabbath and metal in general, but this is the album where the doomy, sludgy stoner stuff really comes into play for the most part, and the tuning and the tones have a lot to do with that, as well as the subject matter for a lot of the song. Just the note choice that Geezer has over, the simple power chord riffing that a lot of Tony Iommi does. Again, just the way they mix, this album would not work as well if you didn't have one without the other. They are the stars of this entire album overall. Pretty simple groove, just da-da, da-da-da, da-da-da. And then you hear Geezer's bass, it's just doo-doo, boo-doo, boom, 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 boom. He'll do a lot of that kind of stuff. And just the approaches they both have, because I mentioned earlier that Tony Iommi used lighter gauge strings. Now he played nines, which is pretty thin, in C sharp, which is very uncommon. Nowadays, you look up on Google, like, oh, what string gauge should I get for C sharp tuning? They usually tell you to get thicker ones. He did the exact opposite at the time. And because of that, you kind of have to play really delicately when you're playing in a tuning that low with strings that thin. Otherwise, the strings are going to vibrate like way too wildly and kind of go out of tune. So Tony has this like very reserved way of hitting the strings on the album. It's like the amp and his pedals and whatever effects he has going on doing a lot of the work. Geezer, on the other hand, the exact opposite. He actually takes his plucking hand and plays right over the fretboard. He did this on the first two albums as well. And strikes it really hard over the fretboard, like I said. Not so much over where the pickups of the bass are, but just really digging into it. And it gives it this very bubbly kind of sound, for lack of a better word. Just me and my friends, we always call it the Geezer Butler Bubba Buzz, because it always sounds like it's going like boom, 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 boom. It's kind of hilarious, but in a musical context, it works super well. So he's, really digging into it. Tony's really delicate, and you put those two things together, it's just so good. You're gonna hear me gushing like over every fucking song on here, but kind of does that simple groove and like instrumental kind of chorus part until the middle section where it starts to build up. A lot of cool bass by Geezer Butler, and then during the guitar solo, they're all just kind of jamming, and Bill Ward's just going nuts. I found that Bill Ward's drumming on the album overall is a little bit more reserved than on the first two records, but he does go a little crazy here. Most of the album is just going to come down to like these bass lines and just these simple sludgy sounding riffs. And Sweet Leaf is like a taste of things to come overall on the album. Just great intro to a fantastic record. And yeah, that's all I got to say about that. Track 2, After Forever. Now this song starts with like some weird synthy sounding kind of effect. I'm not really sure what they did. But then this great kind of almost like happy sounding guitar part that Tony Iommi plays comes in. And immediately after, the bass comes in and does a over the chords. And again, great interplay between the two tones and styles of those two players. And this song is just riff after riff after riff after riff. It just doesn't stop coming, because like the main verse part just it's so good. There's this I guess a breakdown section or a secondary verse section you could call it that comes in a little later. It's super heavy. It's like, da 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 on the guitar, and then the bass and the drums come in, and the bass just punches in every time Bill Ward hits a snare, so it's just boom, 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 boom. It sounds like you're dropping a brick on the goddamn floor. Like it really just impacts you. Like just zero remorse. It's great. And there's a very groovy kind of guitar section too, just classic 70s sounding Black Sabbath riffs. The best parts about this song are just the riffs and just the bass parts that Geezer does with it. You're going to hear myself repeating myself like over and over and over again about this, but it really is the standout of this album. Absolutely just crushing. Love it. Lyrically, I always saw this song as like kind of a knee-jerk reaction to the responses that critics had over Black Sabbath's use of like occult imagery and stuff like that. It's like they put the imagery out there, got flack for it, and they were like, oh, no, we believe in God and all that. So I always thought it was kind of funny for that, but it's more the music of this particular song that I'm really into. One of my favorites on the record. Great track. Track 3, Embryo. Now, this is like a short, like 30-second track with kind of like just a little interlude thing, and it kind of has like this medieval sort of classical guitar kind of feel to it. I think it's just Tony Iommi playing on it. Very calm, peaceful, kind of just acts as like, a bit of a break from just the relentless riffing that we've had from the prior two songs, and then the song that comes immediately after this. But, yeah. not too much I could say about it. Like, every time I hear it, I just kind of picture, like, medieval royalty kind of strutting about to it. But, yeah, cool little, interlude, break track thing, whatever you want to call it. Track 4, Children of the Grave. Now, on my previous review of Paranoid, I mentioned that the title track of Paranoid was kind of like an influence on like punk rock and like thrash metal stuff in the future. You could make an argument that Children of the Grave is a straight up thrash metal song. It's it's got that speed and is much more aggressive than Paranoid is. It's just that isn't really too far off from you would hear something like early Metallica or something doing. And this is probably one of Sabbath's most popular song, probably the most popular song from this album. I like it a lot. It has a very dense kind of percussion section during the instrumental chorus that you hear early on. Because there's like one drum track, and then you almost hear like this separate. I don't know what he played on, congas or timpani or whatever it might have been, but you hear just like this like whole another drum track over it. It gives it this very tribal, animalistic kind of feel. Great riffing. Ozzy singing well. I like the percussion a lot, and of course, again, the interplay between Tony Iommi and Geezer Butler can't overstate enough like how much those two things mix together well. Although I will say Geezer's bass lines aren't quite as like elaborate as they were in the other ones, like jumping around. Like you still hear them going nuts, but it's a little bit more stripped back to serve the riff, I would say, on this song. And then towards the middle, we get this super heavy, like really heavy. Just again going back to that early Black Sabbath, those slow doom riffs, just right in the middle, and then it goes right back to the speed, and the song continues as normal. And then towards the end of the song, once it's actually over, you hear this like weird feedback and stuff, and then Ozzy's just kind of like whispering like "Children of the Grave." I remember hearing the song for the very first time. My mom had gotten me this like Black Sabbath Greatest Hits CD. It was like 1970 to 1978 or something. It was basically just the Ozzy years. And I remember hearing that for the first time when I was younger. Like, dark room, just hearing it in my headphones. I'm just looking around like, like ghosts were coming out of my CD player or whatever at the time. And lyrically, the song seems to be about just, youth rebellion against a world that could go to hell, basically, because of all the trouble that's going on in the world, whether it be war, politics, etc., etc. And you could argue that Children of the Grave is more applicable to, like, the millennial and Gen Z generation and what the world is going to be like in the future compared to what it was for boomers. I mean, as things like, climate crises become more common and stuff like that, and migrant issues, and wars, you could argue Children of the Grave is unfortunately a very prophetic song about future generations. This song lyrically has aged well, unfortunately. This is just a classic song. Everyone likes Children of the Grave. I mean, I don't know how you can not enjoy this track. Track 5 is Orchid. This is another short instrumental piece, kind of like what we had with Embryo. A bit of a different vibe, though. Not so much of like a somber sort of like medieval jaunt. This is more of like a soothing kind of like classical sort of feel to it. And, it's just very relaxing. Again, it's just another brief, reprieve from just the relentless, riffing sludginess of what most of the album is associated with. So, yeah, the thing I gotta say about the instrumentals on this album is they're not dragged out or padded out like some of the stuff I complained about on the first record of the second album. It's not just endless jamming or stuff that's hard to keep interesting. It's like, you had a little piece of music, it was like, okay, this is kind of cool, but we shouldn't really drag it out to like 3 or 4 minutes. We'll just do a quick 30-second or minute and a half kind of instrumental as like just to kind of bring the listener down, calm them down, and then hit them with the heaviness again with the next track. Track 6, Lord of this World. Now, Lord of this World has a lot in common with After Forever in the fact that it's just riff after riff after riff. And arguably one of the heaviest riffs on the record. as soon as you hear it, it's just dun 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 dun, and the volume swells in. You hear more overdrive with Tony Iommi's riff playing, and then again, Geezer just pounding away, doubling the same notes basically, but the two tones together just give it sludgy, just earth crushing quality to it. I love it. And then when the verse comes in, again, another riff. Again, the bass line, the way it mixes in with it, and then Ozzy comes in, just wailing away on top of it. And, like I mentioned earlier, Bill Ward's drumming is a little bit more reserved, very hard hitting, but not quite as flashy and not as Philly as the previous two records were. There's this kind of groovy section after the second verse. I want to say that I think Bill's doing some cowbell stuff, which is funny. It's a cool riff. Just a classic sounding 70s Black Sabbath riff. And then the solo kicks in, and the bass line underneath is arguably one of my favorite bass solos that Geezer Butler has ever done. It's just one of my favorite lines he ever did. Something about it just always clicks into my head. It just sounds so good. It's I barely even noticed the guitar solo. Nothing against Tony Iommi, but that bass part is just so good in my opinion. And then you actually get to the chorus, which they only do once. It's just this, big pounding part. Da 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 da, Lord of this world. Da 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 da, evil possessor. And then it goes back into that riff you heard at the very beginning of the song and repeats a few more parts. Lyrically, this song seems to be about people choosing the evil path in life. You hear a lot of there's a lot of Christian symbolism in the song again, and After Forever earlier. And it's almost acknowledging that there's a higher power, but you're choosing the bad side and choosing to make a world a worse place, and kind of a criticism of those kind of selfish people that just don't care about anyone but themselves. And you could argue that a good chunk of these songs are just riff salad, but they're arranged in a really natural way where it just flows and you're just bobbing your head, just every track. And yeah, another stellar song, nothing bad I can say. Track 7, we have Solitude now. Solitude is huge contrast to every other song on the album so far, because it's basically a very soft, jazzy feeling kind of ballad. Black Sabbath had Sleeping Village, Paranoid and Planet Caravan, Master of Reality has Solitude. And out of all the songs on this album, this is the one where I like Ozzy's vocal performance the best. Because, on the other ones, he's just kind of howling away, high pitched, really yelly. This one, he's very subdued, very melodic. And, the songs seems to be about heartbreak and loneliness and stuff like that. And just the low key nature of his voice really seems to nail that tone. And, this is also a song where Tony Iommi really flexed his creative muscles. I mean, he's playing the guitar. There's flute all over the song. That I guess, his days in Jethro Tull must have rubbed off on him for this track. There really isn't any percussion. Cool, chill bass track. This very relaxing, calm song. So if Embryo and Orchid were just these short interludes to give you a breath, this is the real, just kind of relaxed moment of the album. And, I like it pretty much just as much as the heavy songs, honestly. It's just a really well-made ballad. I would say maybe, as much as I love Planet Caravan, I might even like it more, depending on what they ask me. Both great songs. And, back on Ozzy's vocals, I think they put a delay effect or something to kind of fill it out more. Almost give it a stereo effect or a multi-track kind of sound. And this song is actually a good time to point out that I think they used a 16-track recorder, whereas the previous albums it was 8 tracks. So they were able to do a lot more overdubbing and stuff, more guitars, more leads and harmonies, and everything that they wanted to put. They just had more options. And yeah, that's all I really have to say about Solitude. Just a chill, laid back palate cleanser before we get into like the dirge of the final track on the album. Track 8, Into the Void. Now, this is, again, just like After Forever and Lord of this World. It's just riff after riff after riff. It just starts with boom. I mean, you heard the riff at the beginning of this video. I mean, just great stuff. And then as soon as Geezer's bass punches in, it's just the way it just, as soon as that bass comes in, man, it's just like, it just hits you right in the gut. Like the way those tones mix together, I can't overemphasize that in every song. I keep mentioning that in, but yeah, just great interplay between the two instruments. And after that intro riff, we get into that main one, the dun 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 dun, just a classic kind of sounding stoner metal riff. And Ozzy's vocals over that, like he'll sing a couple lines like sort of fast and then like a little slow, and those are basically all the verses. So he'll be like, rockin' engines burning fuel so fast, up into the night sky they blast. And that's basically every verse in this song. There really isn't much of a chorus. The only other area where there's like more vocals is this like middle section, like bridge area. It's almost like a fast kind of jazzy kind of feel. Just he sings over that, but again, the song's just more riff salad in a good way. I mean, that can be bad, but it feels like every riff that they kind of put together, they made a conscious effort to make it flow as much as possible. There's this cool like bluesy riff that Geezer Butler does during every one of Tony Iommi's guitar solos that I really enjoy. I mean, every riff in the song is great. And then right before the last solo, you have this big build up. He just keeps going a little higher each time until like the last couple guitar solos. And lyrically, the lyrics seem to depict like almost this like space caravan of people leaving Earth, because it's just become a desolate wasteland full of like war, famine, decay, pollution. And the song really does sound like here on this space caravan, just kind of traveling through the reaches of space in search of a new home, new civilization to call your own. But yeah, just a great song to end the record with. I mean, I really have no complaints. I mean, the bridge section going back into the verse is a bit sudden, but it doesn't really bother me. I mean, that usually does, but something about the way it's done in this song that I can't really put into words, it just works. Great riffs. I mean, this might be one of my favorite Black Sabbath songs, period. Again, it might sound like I'm just repeating myself over and over with each track, but they're just such high quality. They all have the same good qualities other than Solitude. Solitude has its own kind of vibe going on. But yeah, another great track. So what are my overall thoughts on the album? I mean, it's fucking incredible, man. 5 out of 5. I would say this is required listening. If you're not already into Black Sabbath, this is the place to start, in my opinion. It's the best album up until this point. We'll find out later on if I still feel that way with the rest of their discography. But what really carries it is Tony Iommi's excellent guitar sound and Geezer Butler's excellent bass sound, their tones and the way they approach their instrument and how they mesh together. I would say, I don't want to say that Ozzy and Bill Ward's contributions don't matter, but I do feel like they take a backseat compared to that. That's what really carries it forward, in my opinion. And then the production, with those tones, the whole album just has this dirty, grimy sound, like just this feeling of sludginess, and that's why this album was credited before, inspiring so many stoner doom sludge bands that we have today. I mean, I don't think we would have bands like Sleep or Electric Wizard if not for Master of Reality. The short little instrumentals, they just get to the point. They don't overstay their welcome. It's just a nice breath before another riff just pummels you over the head again. And the soft parts really make the heavy parts shine a lot more. I mean, when you have consistent heaviness, it can get a little monotonous and like tiring sometimes. But those moments of levity really make those crushing heavy parts hit even harder. It's just fantastic. Great riffs, great bass line. I think this might be like the shortest studio album they ever put out. Ozzy's killing it. This album's like super heavy for the 70s. I mean, you can't find too many other albums in 1971 that even come close to this. A small handful. But yeah, I think this album's a masterpiece because it's just very focused, and I think the length of the album reflects that. It's not very long, but it's like, all killer, no filler. Let's just get to the point. Really double down on the heaviness that we've pioneered up until this point. And the tuning helps with that too. The C sharp standard tuning. Just absolute masterpiece of an album. If you haven't listened to this or, buy it, stream it, whatever you want to do, play it on YouTube, listen to this album at least once. You owe it to yourself to listen to Master of Reality. They just really doubled down on that heavy approach that they innovated. Great record. One of my favorites of all time. But, next week we'll be doing a video on Volume 4. Looking forward to that. It was the very first album that wasn't produced by Roger Bain, so we'll see what we think about that. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. I want to continue doing the Black Sabbath retrospective. And, listen to Master of Reality. Hey guys, in the process of editing my video, I totally forgot to mention the top 3 tracks. So, in order of appearance, After Forever, Lord of this World, and Into the Void. But if I'm being honest, just listen to the whole damn thing. It's fucking great.